The issue of completion is, I think, one of the biggest issues community colleges are facing. And really, when you think about the education of students from low-income communities, communities of color, immigrant students, um, the education of those students is probably the biggest social justice issue of our time at all educational levels. I think that community colleges do a couple of things. First, they represent a second chance for many of these students who have come out of the K-12 system unprepared. And particularly for African American students, for Latino students, for first generation college goers, community college is that entree. It is that opportunity to correct their K-12 educational experiences. And secondly, just in terms of our economic and social future, community colleges are the pipeline to our workforce. Recent studies have shown that we need 1 million more educated workers just in the next 15 years. And where are those students going to come from? They're going to come from largely from community colleges that will help transfer students to four-year institutions. And so there's no doubt in terms of the role I think that community college will play in our future. Certainly for underrepresented students, community colleges are essential to their participation in our workforce. I think another issue that's really critical that we don't focus as much on because we're really looking at gaps in achievement amongst groups. We're really looking at graduation. We're looking at AA degree completion and transfer, but we don't talk much about what we want to see in terms of students being educated and what that really means. And so if we think about preparing people to participate in an increasingly interdependent, pluralistic society, we have to think about how we can better and best educate vulnerable students. When we think about social justice issues and equity, and there's a lot of discussion that the issue of we focus so much on access that we haven't focused much on success. We really see that access and success are inextricably connected, and equity. All of those are connected. You can't really separate the three. And when we think about what's happening now in community colleges, access is being threatened for many students. There are a lot of folks who say that most students are vulnerable students in our community colleges. And I certainly think that that is true to a great extent. But there are students who are much more vulnerable than others. These are students who come into our colleges who are not prepared, who also don't have the social capital to navigate the complexity of our colleges, to jump through the bureaucratic hurdles. They don't know where to begin. And so those students are the ones that most likely leave our colleges early. And I think that, in talking about completion, we're really talking about a very small proportion of students who actually make it to that point. About 1/10 of students actually get to that point of completion. We lose half of our students in the first year. And studies have really shown that, particularly for Black and Latino students, that their exit out of college early is a permanent one. They don't return at all. And I think when we think about the implications of that for our society, it really gives us more of an impetus to address this with a sense of urgency and a sense of commitment. If we don't do this now, then we're really looking at really lowering the quality of the state's, our quality of life in the state for years to come. I've spoken a lot recently about the implications of not educating those students, particularly in the face or in the throes of a recession or a jobless recovery. Because what we're really looking at are students who are coming from communities where there is no other opportunity. Oftentimes, our students would leave early and go get jobs. They'd be lured away by jobs. And those opportunities are dwindling in many of our communities. You can't look at California and think about it having one of the 5th highest unemployment rates. looking at communities in the Central Valley, particularly that have some of the highest unemployment in the entire nation, and know that and think that there's opportunities there for young people, particularly students under 30, particularly for students of color, where their unemployment rates mirror that of those from the Great Depression 70 years ago. So it's not so easy anymore for students to leave college for some other opportunity, and I think that that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing students with a heightened sense of desperation. One faculty member told us that we can see that there is a greater sense of knowing how important it is to get through a class, to get into a class, because of the competition, because of the crowding, because of the implications if students don't get there. So I think that there is an imperative for us to address this issue now more than ever. I think it's difficult because in some ways it's easy to talk about who we can't serve in this climate, given the fiscal crisis. It's easier not to serve students, particularly those at low levels of basic skills. When you have students who are coming to our community colleges that would have been in a state college, they're easier to serve. They understand the system in ways that other students who are less prepared for college do. And there certainly is kind of a cascading and pushing out. So I think that it's clear that this is the time to address this issue. The question then becomes, what do we do? What do we do now? Because what we've really seen is such a hemorrhaging of students. We know that their chances of moving through the basic skill sequence is very low, hovering around 5%, going from basic skills courses to transfer level. We haven't had a tremendous amount of success, so what would make it easier now? I think one of the things is that I think there are a couple of ways that we can start to think about addressing the needs of these students in particular, the most vulnerable students, I think. One is definitely looking at how we can scale up, how we think about educational planning and goal setting in our community colleges. One thing that we've gleaned from our work with students is they're often sent swirling. They come into college, they really aren't clear, some of them, what they want to do, and it's very difficult for them to kind of really set their educational goals. And there's a couple of things I think we need to keep in mind here when we think about that. One is that students coming from these communities have not had the opportunity to really understand what their options are. And so for us to have discussions about particularly young people coming in and being clear about what their major should be and clear about the direction, their college direction, I think is somewhat naive. Oftentimes, students that we've spoken to have said they've had very little, if any, counseling at the K-12 level. They're unaware of career paths. They've never had any kind of discussions with anyone, both in their families or at their high schools about it. And I think there's something else that's very, very important here, and that's to think about the fact that they just are not aware of options, and the fact that a lot of times students don't know if they can be successful in college. And so being able to look out is very difficult when you really have not had a lot of success. When we have talked to students and interviewed them, it is clear from what they've told us is that they build on success little by little. There's some pivotal moments in which they realize that they can actually be in college, that they can actually be successful. And their goals change over time as they build confidence and they are experiencing some levels of success. And so going in and thinking, maybe I can be a teacher because that's all I've really ever seen, and then having some experience of successful encounters in the system and seeing that they can be an engineer, they can start their own company. I mean, the goals get loftier as they're able to see what they can do in college.